When a good woman is hurt, the world around her seems to fall apart in silence. It's not always loud and it's not always seen, but the impact is deep and lasting. The betrayal of trust, the loss of safety, and the breaking of something she once believed unshakable create a storm inside her that no one else can fully understand. She begins to question everything, her worth, her choices, her heart. It's a moment of darkness, a moment when everything that once felt certain suddenly feels foreign. But even in that darkness, something profound begins to stir. At first, she doesn't recognize it. It feels like pain, like exhaustion, like defeat. It's the kind of ache that lingers, that doesn't let her sleep at night. She replays every moment, every word, wondering where things went wrong and what she could have done differently. The truth, though, is that she could have done nothing more. She gave her all, her patience, her understanding, her love, and still it was mishandled. This realization hurts, but it is also the beginning of her awakening. Slowly, she starts to see herself differently, not as the one who wasn't enough, but as the one who gave more than most ever could. The pain starts to lose its power over her. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it changes shape. It becomes fuel. It becomes the quiet force that pushes her to rebuild, to rediscover who she is beyond the hurt. She learns that even when someone fails to see her value, that value remains untouched, waiting for her to reclaim it. She begins to rebuild in silence. No one sees the small victories, getting out of bed on a hard day, smiling for the first time in weeks, choosing peace instead of confrontation. Each step forward feels like lifting a mountain, but she takes it anyway. Her strength doesn't come from pretending she's fine. It comes from facing the pain head on, from feeling every bit of it and still choosing to move. That is what transformation looks like, not a sudden burst of strength, but a steady reclaiming of one's power. As she rebuilds, she begins to understand the beauty of her resilience. She realizes that pain has refined her, not ruined her. It has stripped away the illusions and left behind something raw and real. She learns to trust herself again, to listen to the voice inside that she once silenced to keep someone else comfortable. That voice becomes her compass, guiding her toward peace and authenticity. The transformation doesn't mean she forgets. It means she remembers differently. Instead of carrying the pain as a wound, she carries it as wisdom. She stops asking why it happened to her and starts asking what it's teaching her. She learns that love doesn't have to mean losing herself, that giving doesn't mean being taken advantage of, and that vulnerability, when honored, is her greatest strength. Over time, her reflection changes. She starts to see someone new in the mirror, someone softer but stronger, someone who has walked through fire and come out shaped by it, not destroyed by it. The woman who once questioned her worth now stands with quiet confidence, knowing she can survive anything because she already has. The scars remain, but they no longer hurt. They tell her story. She also begins to see others differently. Where she once sought validation, she now seeks alignment. Where she once gave endlessly, she now gives wisely. Her love hasn't hardened, it has matured. It's more intentional, more discerning, more grounded in self-respect. She understands now that the people who deserve her heart are the ones who treat it with care, not convenience. Through all of this, her pain transforms into purpose. She finds strength in helping others see that they too can rise after being broken. Her story becomes a reminder that healing is not about forgetting what happened, but about reclaiming who you are because of it. She no longer hides her scars, she honors them. They are proof that she was strong enough to survive something that could have destroyed her. And one day, without even realizing it, she looks back and sees how far she's come. The hurt that once defined her has become the foundation of her power. The tears that once blurred her vision have cleared her perspective. And the woman she has become, resilient, wise, and whole, stands as living proof that when a good woman is hurt, what follows is not her ending, but her transformation into something extraordinary. Kindness has always been one of the most misunderstood strengths in the human experience. People often mistake it for fragility, believing that gentle souls are easy to manipulate or control. But when life tests a person who leads with kindness, something unexpected happens. The very quality that others perceive as weakness becomes the anchor that keeps them grounded. Kindness, in its purest form, requires immense courage. It means choosing compassion in a world that often rewards cruelty, and extending understanding even when met with indifference. To remain kind in the face of pain is not naive, it is profoundly powerful. When a good woman continues to show kindness after being hurt, it is not because she is blind to what happened. It's because she refuses to let someone else's actions dictate her character. Her kindness is not submission, it is strength. She knows she can respond with bitterness, but she doesn't. She chooses grace, not to excuse what was done, but to free herself from becoming like the one who hurt her. That decision is where her true power begins. It is the quiet revolution of refusing to let pain turn her into something she's not. She understands that the world often misunderstands softness. It thinks that those who love deeply must also break easily. But what many fail to see is that kindness has layers. It is not weakness, it is willpower. It takes strength to keep an open heart after betrayal, to keep believing in love after disappointment, to keep giving when it feels safer to withhold. Her kindness isn't passive, it's a conscious act of defiance against bitterness. Each time she chooses to rise above resentment, she reclaims control of her story. Kindness for her becomes a form of wisdom. She learns that being good doesn't mean tolerating what destroys her peace. It means having enough self-respect to walk away when kindness is taken for granted. Her love becomes clearer, more selective. She learns to give it where it is valued, not wasted. And yet, she doesn't stop being kind. She simply becomes wiser about who deserves it. That shift marks the difference between innocence and maturity. She doesn't let pain close her heart, she lets it teach her discernment. Through her journey, she begins to see that kindness requires boundaries. It's not about saying yes to everything. It's about knowing when to say no without losing compassion. This balance becomes her strength, the ability to be firm without being cruel, to stand tall without stepping on others. Her kindness now carries a quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. It speaks in calm actions, not in loud declarations. It is steady, confident, and unshakable. When she encounters people who mistake her grace for weakness, she no longer feels the need to convince them otherwise. She simply lives in her truth. Their misunderstanding no longer affects her. She knows that kindness is not about being understood, it's about being authentic. It's about staying true to her nature, even when the world expects her to become hardened. Her kindness becomes her identity, not because she's afraid to change, but because she knows the world needs more of it, not less. In time, she recognizes that kindness is a mirror of inner strength. It reflects a heart that has endured storms, yet remains capable of love. It's not about ignoring pain, it's about transforming it into something meaningful. When she chooses to treat others with compassion, it doesn't mean she has forgotten what was done to her. It means she's decided not to let that define how she treats the world. Her response becomes her victory, a quiet, unspoken triumph of humanity over hurt. There's a certain power in her calmness. People sense it even before she speaks. It's the presence of someone who has been through chaos and emerged with clarity. Her kindness is no longer about pleasing others. It's about maintaining peace within herself. It's a way of saying, you can wound me, but you cannot change who I am. That is the most profound kind of strength, to stay gentle in a world that tried to make her hard. The transformation of her kindness also changes how she sees others. She begins to understand that those who hurt her were often acting out of their own pain. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it gives her perspective. It allows her to forgive without returning, to let go without bitterness. Her empathy becomes sharper, more aware. She can recognize brokenness in others without letting it break her. In that understanding, her kindness grows deeper, not weaker. And as she continues to walk through life, her kindness becomes her legacy. It radiates quietly, influencing everyone who crosses her path. She becomes proof that kindness doesn't crumble under pressure, it evolves. It becomes more intentional, more resilient, more rooted in truth. Her kindness is not a weakness to be pitied, it is a light to be respected. It is the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but changes everything it touches. When a man loses a good woman, the realization doesn't come immediately. It doesn't strike like lightning or announce itself with clarity. It creeps in slowly, through silence and absence, through the echo of her voice that's no longer there. At first, he may feel justified, even relieved. He may believe that she would always be waiting, always forgiving, always understanding. But time has a way of teaching what pride refuses to learn. And soon, he begins to feel the emptiness that follows losing someone who truly cared. He starts to notice the small things first, the way her laughter used to fill a room, the warmth of her presence that made even the worst days bearable. He remembers the way she believed in him, not because of what he had, but because of who he could become. She saw potential in him that he hadn't yet earned. When he faltered, she encouraged him. When he doubted himself, she stood firm. And when he failed her, she still hoped he would do better. That kind of faith is rare, and once it's gone, nothing else quite replaces it. There's a particular silence that follows the absence of a good woman, not just quiet, but a kind of stillness that exposes what's missing. The home feels colder, the routine emptier, and the heart heavier. He begins to realize that her love wasn't just affection, it was structure. It was the calm in the chaos, the reason he felt grounded even when the world seemed unstable. Without her, things that once seemed easy now feel unsteady. He starts to understand that she wasn't asking for perfection, she was asking for effort. At first, he might try to fill the void. He might search for her reflection in other faces, in fleeting connections that mimic what he once had. But imitation can't replace authenticity. The more he searches, the more he realizes that what he lost was not just a person, it was a presence. It was the steady heartbeat of loyalty, care, and devotion that no one else has quite been able to replicate. The emptiness becomes a mirror, showing him what he took for granted. He remembers the moments when she tried to reach him, the conversations he dismissed, the tears he ignored, the times she said she felt unseen. Back then, he thought her patience was endless, her forgiveness automatic. He didn't notice the quiet ways she was slipping away, piece by piece, as her hope faded. Only when she was gone did he understand that she had been giving him countless chances to rise to the level of her love. Each one was a gift, and each one unacknowledged brought him closer to losing her entirely. There comes a point when the loss becomes undeniable. It shows itself in the smallest details, the songs that used to make her smile, the photos tucked away that carry both joy and regret. He begins to understand that love isn't something to be managed, it's something to be honored. He sees now that she wasn't trying to control him, she was trying to build with him. She wanted partnership, not perfection. She wanted effort, not excuses, and realizing that too late becomes one of the hardest truths to live with. In that reflection, he also begins to see himself differently. The man he was when she loved him and the man he became after hurting her are not the same. The first was hopeful, open, and capable of growth. The second was guarded, distant, and unsure. Losing her forces him to confront parts of himself he never wanted to face. The selfishness, the pride, the fear of vulnerability. It's uncomfortable, but it's also where growth begins. Pain, after all, has a way of stripping away illusion. He starts to understand that she didn't just love him, she helped him see who he could be. Her belief in him was a mirror, one that reflected his potential before he could recognize it himself. When she walked away, that mirror shattered, and in its place, he's left with the responsibility of rebuilding that image without her guidance. He realizes that the loss of her isn't just emotional, it's transformational. It's the moment when he must decide whether to stay broken or become better. Every memory of her becomes a lesson. The sound of her laughter reminds him of what joy feels like when it's real. The thought of her disappointment reminds him of the cost of taking love for granted. The image of her walking away reminds him that no matter how much someone loves you, if you don't treat them right, they will eventually choose peace over pain. These realizations don't come as punishment, they come as truth, and truth, while painful, is often the beginning of change. Over time, the weight of her absence becomes both a burden and a teacher. He begins to understand that losing a good woman isn't about losing attention or companionship. It's about losing balance, losing someone who brought out his best self. The loss lingers, not because she was perfect, but because she was genuine. She gave him a love rooted in patience and belief, and in breaking that, he broke something sacred. And as the silence settles, he finally understands that when he hurt her, he didn't just lose her. He lost the version of himself that her love helped him discover. After being hurt, a good woman begins to understand the quiet power of boundaries. What once felt like distance now becomes protection. She realizes that not everyone deserves full access to her heart, that love can still be kind without being endless, that giving too much of herself to those who take without care only leads to emptiness. Boundaries are no longer walls built out of fear. They are gates built out of self-respect. She learns that she can love deeply while still protecting her peace, and that saying no is one of the most loving things she can do for herself. The first time she sets a boundary, it feels uncomfortable. She is used to giving, to fixing, to understanding. For so long, she confused love with sacrifice, believing that the more she gave, the more worthy she became. But the truth is, love does not require her to lose herself. As she learns this, she starts to reclaim her energy from places it never should have been spent. Each boundary she sets is not a rejection of others, it is an acceptance of herself. It's the moment she chooses peace over chaos, clarity over confusion. She begins to see that boundaries are not about control, they are about balance. They allow her to define where she ends and where someone else begins. They keep her from carrying burdens that are not hers to bear. She recognizes that she can still be compassionate without being consumed. Her empathy remains, but it's guided by discernment. She no longer tries to save everyone, because she knows now that saving herself is her greatest responsibility. And in protecting her peace, she becomes more grounded, more confident, more whole. There was a time when she thought boundaries meant losing love, that they would push people away. But now she understands that the right people will never be threatened by them. The right people will see her boundaries as an invitation to love her better, to understand her more deeply. And the wrong ones will simply fade, unable to exist in a space where they cannot take advantage. This clarity frees her. It shows her that love built on guilt or fear isn't love at all, it's dependency. Real love thrives within the safety of mutual respect. With each new boundary, she learns something new about herself. She discovers her triggers, her limits, her needs. She begins to speak up instead of staying silent, to express herself instead of suppressing her feelings. The woman who once apologized for everything now stands firm in her truth. She no longer feels guilty for wanting peace, for needing rest, for expecting reciprocity. These small acts of self-honor accumulate into strength, and that strength is not loud or defensive. It's steady, calm, and sure of its value. Her boundaries also reshape her relationships. Some people don't understand her anymore, and that's okay. She's not the same woman she was before she learned to protect her energy. She's more deliberate now. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't beg for understanding, she commands respect through her consistency. The people who truly care learn to meet her where she stands. They see that her boundaries don't make her cold, they make her clear. And clarity, she realizes, is one of the purest forms of love. Through this evolution, she also learns that boundaries are not meant to punish others, they are meant to honor her own growth. They are a reflection of her healing, a sign that she's no longer living in survival mode. She no longer lets others dictate how much of herself she gives. She knows now that if she constantly has to shrink to make someone else comfortable, that relationship was never meant for her. Her boundaries become a compass that points her back to herself every time she starts to drift. Setting boundaries doesn't mean she stops caring, it means she starts caring correctly. She stops trying to earn love through overgiving. She stops mistaking tolerance for patience. She stops allowing chaos to disguise itself as passion. Her love becomes intentional, not out of habit, not out of fear, but out of choice. She learns that she can still be kind, nurturing, and forgiving without allowing herself to be depleted. She realizes that the energy she used to spend fixing others can now be used to build herself. The process isn't easy. There are moments of doubt, moments where she wonders if she's being too harsh or too distant. But deep down, she knows the truth. Her boundaries are not walls. They are doors that only open for those who come with respect. Every time she enforces them, she feels a little more at peace, a little more in control, a little more like herself. The world may not always reward her for it, but her soul does. Peace becomes her new standard, and she refuses to negotiate it anymore. In time, her boundaries become second nature. They stop feeling like acts of defense and start feeling like acts of love. They shape the way she moves through the world with grace, with confidence, and with purpose. She no longer fears losing people when she stands her ground, because she knows that anyone who leaves because she values herself was never meant to stay. And so she walks forward, not harder, but wiser, carrying with her the understanding that protecting her peace is not selfish, it's sacred. When she finally understands the power of empathy over ego, everything changes. There was a time when she would react from pain, trying to prove her worth, trying to be heard by someone who had already stopped listening. She used to believe that if she could explain herself enough, love enough, sacrifice enough, maybe things would go back to how they were. But now she knows that ego is a wall and empathy is a bridge. Ego wants to win, empathy wants to understand. And when someone values winning more than connection, love cannot survive. She begins to see that ego thrives in noise, in arguments, in pride, in blame. It feeds off being right. Empathy, on the other hand, lives in stillness. It listens without defending, it feels without retaliating, it understands without needing to control. When she was hurt, she saw how ego destroyed what could have been saved. Ego refused to apologize, refused to soften, refused to see beyond itself. It made love conditional, turning moments of tenderness into competitions of power. Empathy, she realizes now, is the antidote to that kind of damage. When she chooses empathy, it doesn't mean she excuses the pain. It means she chooses to look deeper, not to justify what was done, but to understand what it revealed. She starts to recognize that hurt people often hurt others, not because they are cruel, but because they are unhealed. This awareness doesn't erase the wound, but it changes her perspective. It allows her to release resentment without inviting chaos back into her life. Empathy helps her move on with compassion instead of bitterness, with peace instead of pride. She also starts to see how ego used to live within her, quietly shaping her reactions. The need to be understood, the urge to defend her kindness, the exhaustion that came from constantly trying to fix what she didn't break, all of that came from ego's fear of being unseen. When she lets that go, she becomes lighter. She no longer needs to prove her goodness or explain her heart. She learns that sometimes silence is stronger than argument, and walking away is braver than staying to fight for what doesn't want to be healed. Empathy becomes her strength because it teaches her balance. It shows her how to feel deeply without losing herself. She learns to hold space for others without carrying their burdens. She can now see pain in others without letting it consume her. This balance transforms the way she loves, the way she forgives, the way she connects. She no longer reacts from her wounds, she responds from her wisdom. Every time she chooses understanding over anger, She reclaims her power from the things that once controlled her. Through empathy, she begins to understand that healing isn't about revenge or proving a point. It's about freeing herself from the endless cycle of reaction and regret. Ego tells her to protect herself by building walls. Empathy tells her to protect herself by letting go. Ego wants closure through confrontation. Empathy finds closure through peace. And the deeper she grows into empathy, the more she realizes that forgiveness isn't about weakness. It's about refusing to let pain make her bitter. She starts noticing how ego keeps people stuck. It keeps them defending, pretending, avoiding. It convinces them that vulnerability is dangerous, that softness means surrender. But the truth she's come to know is that vulnerability is where real strength lies. Empathy allows her to stay open without being naive. It allows her to see clearly without losing compassion. It lets her stand in her truth while still wishing healing for those who hurt her. That kind of grace doesn't come from pride, it comes from peace. In relationships, empathy becomes her foundation. She no longer seeks to win arguments, she seeks to understand perspectives. She listens more, speaks with intention, and responds with care. She knows that love cannot coexist with ego's constant need for validation. She wants connection that feels safe, not competitive, communication that builds, not breaks. Her empathy allows her to meet others where they are, but it also reminds her that she doesn't have to stay where she's disrespected. Over time, empathy softens her, but it also strengthens her boundaries. She doesn't absorb the pain of others anymore, she observes it, learns from it, and releases it. She learns that she can care deeply without overextending herself. She understands that empathy without limits turns into self-destruction. So she balances her compassion with self-respect. She gives, but not endlessly. She listens, but not at the expense of her peace. She forgives, but she never forgets the lessons that came with the pain. And as she continues to choose empathy over ego, she finds a new kind of freedom. It's quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in self-awareness. She realizes that she cannot control what others do, but she can control how she responds. She doesn't let bitterness define her, and she doesn't let ego speak for her heart. In a world that glorifies pride and performance, she chooses presence. She chooses understanding. She chooses love, not the kind that demands, but the kind that heals. Growth does not begin in comfort. It begins in the stillness that follows heartbreak. When everything familiar crumbles, when love turns to silence, when trust is broken, something inside a person begins to awaken. The pain forces reflection, and reflection demands honesty. She starts to ask herself difficult questions, not about what was done to her, but about what she's willing to accept, what she's ready to release, and who she wants to become. This is the beginning of evolution, the slow and quiet kind that happens beneath the surface before the world ever notices. She begins to see how patterns repeat themselves, how wounds left unhealed attract the same kind of pain again and again. The difference this time is that she refuses to stay unaware. She chooses to see clearly, even when the truth hurts. Growth, she learns, is not glamorous. It is often lonely, uncomfortable, and humbling. It requires admitting that love alone is not enough if it's not met with respect. It means confronting the ways she once betrayed herself by trying to hold on to what was already falling apart. Every realization cuts deep, but every cut makes space for new wisdom to grow. With time, she learns to turn her focus inward. She stops chasing closure from others and starts finding it within herself. The things that used to consume her now teach her. The apologies that never came no longer matter, because she has learned that healing is not owed, it's chosen. Each day, she picks herself up piece by piece, building a new version of herself out of clarity instead of longing. The pain that once defined her now becomes the fire that refines her, shaping her into someone who no longer needs external validation to feel whole. As she grows, her perspective shifts. She starts to understand that not everyone who enters her life is meant to stay, Some people are meant to teach. Some are mirrors, reflecting her strengths and insecurities back at her. Some are storms, reminding her how strong she can be. And some are lessons wrapped in love, showing her what she must let go of to move forward. This understanding softens her resentment. It allows her to see her past not as a series of failures, but as the curriculum of her becoming. Each heartbreak, each disappointment, each ending becomes part of her awakening. Through this transformation, she learns that healing and growing are not linear. Some days she feels powerful, untouchable, full of gratitude. Other days she feels raw, fragile, uncertain. But even in those moments, she notices progress. She reacts differently. She chooses peace faster. She forgives herself sooner. Growth is not about never falling again. It's about rising differently each time. Her resilience becomes quiet but unbreakable, built not on denial, but on deep self-awareness. She learns to trust her intuition more than her fear. The process of growth also changes the way she sees love. She no longer romanticizes potential. She no longer confuses effort with commitment. She no longer accepts almost love in place of real love. She understands that true connection cannot thrive in imbalance, and that love without accountability is just comfort disguised as care. Her standards rise not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. She knows now that the love she deserves will never ask her to shrink, silence, or sacrifice her peace. As she evolves, she becomes gentler with herself. The way she speaks to herself changes. The way she carries herself shifts. She begins to honor her own energy, her time, her emotions. She stops apologizing for needing space, for wanting solitude, for putting herself first. The woman who once measured her worth through others' eyes now measures it through her own growth. The validation she used to crave becomes irrelevant, replaced by self-acceptance. This is not arrogance, it's healing. It's learning to belong to herself again. She also learns that growth is not just about moving on. It's about transforming how she shows up in every part of her life. She becomes more patient, more discerning, more intentional. Her pain turns into purpose. She starts to create instead of chase, to give without depleting, to dream without fear. She finds joy in simple things again, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. Her growth is not loud or performative. It's steady, graceful, and deeply rooted in truth. Over time, she starts to notice how her energy shifts. The situations that once triggered her no longer hold the same power. The people who once drained her can no longer reach her. She doesn't seek revenge or closure because she has outgrown the need for it. Growth has given her emotional distance, a kind of freedom that cannot be faked. She no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. She simply lives in alignment with her values. And that authenticity attracts the peace she once begged for. The call to evolve becomes her constant companion. It reminds her that healing is not an event, but a lifelong process. Every experience, good or bad, becomes part of her becoming. She understands that growth is not about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about choosing understanding over resentment, patience over pride, and self-respect over attachment. And with each choice, she continues to rise, not as the person she once was, but as the person she was always meant to be.